I initially began working on the Grog video projects back in 2008, may have even been 2007. I don't remember for sure. But the genesis of the project was to be a test bed for early versions of Camtasia Studio 6 and Snagit 8. Virtually all of the original capture footage was shot in an off-the-hip manner. That is to say, without benefit of any predefined script. I just sort of made up the story as I went along. The primary testing objective in Camtasia Studio 6 was to develop and perfect the technique of using speech-to-text techniques to auto-type in the text that you see that make up the bubble callout in the video. All of the initial footage was captured with live off-the-cuff narration. That narration was used to generate the speech-to-text for each separate bubble callout. Fortunately, the STT engine that was available in Camtasia Studio 6 allowed for that to go directly from the STC engine into the text area of the callout using the callout UI on the callout tab. The primary testing goal for Snagit 8 was to develop the technique and methodology for using individual image snags to create effective animations when aligned on the timeline in very short sequences. Specifically, individual step action images were placed on the timeline set to a duration of 3 frames so that we were looking at basically 5 images per second as a action rate. And then they were stitched together to give the illusion of an animation effect. Snagit 8 was used to put together most of the graphics you see in these videos. The scenes that depict animations, particularly those that convey perspective as the animated object moves in distance, those illusions were accomplished by using a template in Snagit 8 to allow me to resize a graphic image as I moved it along a predicted motion path, and as it became smaller in size, I would resize the image within Snagit and then take another capture of that image directly on the Snagit canvas. Those were the captures that were used to create the scenery you see in all the videos. Both the STT directly to call out effort and the stop action Snagit work consumed an incredible amount of time back in the initial testing for those two products. Fortunately, the accuracy of speech to text in Camtasia Studio 6 was very good. And although that took a lot of time, that process went very smoothly. The stop action snags that I made using Snagit 8 to get collections of images that were used to create the animations were tedious and time consuming. I believe the most complex scene that I did using that technique involved the initial fishing trip that you'll see in one of the Grog videos, where he walks across his potato patch, catches fish, and returns to his potato cellar. I can't remember how many separate images I had to use to put together that sequence, but I seem to recall it was over several hundred, and I ended up having to, do it a number of times before it came out looking reasonable. The initial project work of all the Grog efforts was archived in zipped projects and has been worked and reworked many times since 2008. With each additional rework, I tried to work in new tools that were available in the newer versions of Camtasia Studio as they were released. Additionally, the material was produced many different ways, always in a flash capacity, but I made single project, single file productions, single project, multi-file from Marker Productions. I made multiple projects that were linked together using Indaction, Jump URL, and also that were arranged in different batches according to the number of markers in each project. Originally, there were 450 markers in all of the Grog material, and as it was broken down, they eventually turned into, as I recall, 51 separate projects, and they were further refined down to the 26 that you see currently. However, the material that you see is essentially all original, except that with Camtasia Studio 8, I took advantage of animations and the old projects that I still had available to redo many of the scenes where Grog or other things translated the scenery in motion. And I used animations instead of stop action scenes to get the effects. The initial Grog material was produced without the benefit of the moving teeth that you see in the current production sets. Shortly after the first versions of the videos were put together, I made another set where I created the moving teeth out of a bunch of stop action images that were stitched together to give the illusion of teeth that were talking. Those talking teeth were overlaid over top the original videos using Camtasia Studio 6's pip function. Unfortunately, about a year and a half ago, I lost all of my projects associated with Grog when my external 3 terabit hard drive went up in smoke. Fortunately, I could use all of the productions that I had on my website to reconstitute the material you see in the current Grog videos. During the different development stages for the Grog videos, I made use of markers and captions because I lost all the zipped projects. I had to resort to recapturing the text for the markers and the captions using the config XML files that were in the production sets up on my website. In the fall of 2014, after I'd reconstituted all the Grog projects, I further developed them by adding quizzes. Adding the quizzes took an incredible amount of time, and I went so far as to allow a provision for a video viewer to review any missed questions after they had taken the quiz. Normally one would review an entire video to look for the right answers. In this case, I used hotspots that were configured as go to time to just take the viewer to that part of the video where an explicit question was answered. This worked out very well. In the fall of 2016, after all the Grog projects had been reconstructed, they were lost again when another external hard drive suffered a total failure. Camtasia 9 was released at about that same time and offered a substantially improved player, and it was decided to upgrade the Grog videos to make use of the new player. It would have been possible to rebuild the project again by extracting all the information from the config XML files. However, the projects now had quizzes, and that greatly complicated that process. Fortunately, I was able to come up with a method of extracting the XMP metadata that describes how interactive objects like captions, table of contents, hotspots, and quizzes work directly from the MP4 itself. I was able to take that extracted XMP information and inject it into the config xml.js file that resulted from a new production made solely from the MP4. In late January of 2021, I decided to upgrade the Grog videos again. The current set of media is located on my company website. I also decided to put the new versions on screencast.com because I no longer have projects for the original Grog videos. The upgrade was accomplished using just the MP4s that I produced years ago. Because there were no longer any projects available, I decided to remove quizzes from all the productions. Although the Grog project activities started off as a simple testing program for Camtasia Studio 6 and Snagit 8, it soon took on a life of its own. As the Grog storylines began to develop, I saw an opportunity to use it to provide some basic economic lessons involving time, value, and money. Since Grog is a caveman and lives a very simple life, his interaction with the world around him is based on what I call object-oriented economics. Because of the type of lifestyle that Grog has to live, he is forced to interact with the world around him in a very tangible way. Although the Grog storyline starts off in a basic day-to-day survival mode, it soon takes on increasing complexity. Fortunately, Grog is a very astute caveman. He's very observant and he's very contemplative. As he moves through his day-to-day activities and makes new discoveries and changes his behavior accordingly, he soon learns how to put two and two together to come up with insightful rationale about the relationship between himself and the world around him. The main plot of the Grog videos centers around Grog's attempt to figure out a way to save for his own retirement. Although that goal seems straightforward, Grog soon discovers that it is much more difficult due to exigencies of real-world behaviors. As Grog strives to achieve his goals, he soon discovers that he has to invent increasingly more complex economics in order to offset the losses he incurs due to things such as depreciation and natural variability. Fortunately, Grog is prone to exploring new ways to achieve his goals, and the new methods he tries are those that allow him to get closer and closer to achieving his objectives.